Welcome to Uncover the Human, where every conversation revolves around enhancing all the connections in our lives.
Whether that's with our families, co-workers, or even ourselves.
When we can be our authentic selves, magic happens. This is Alex Cullimore.
And this is Cristina Amigoni.
Let's dive in.
This episode includes our interpretations of copyrighted works done by the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, or iPEC. Welcome back to this episode of Uncover the Human. It's just Cristina and I again today as we continue our interpretation and understanding of the core dynamics principles from iPEC. So we are on to the fourth discipline at this point? Yeah, fourth discipline.
Yeah, fourth discipline. Yes. Trust the process.
It's trusting the process, which is what we're doing in making all these podcasts, because we're recording a lot of these before we're even starting releasing any of it. So there's some trust of this process going on right now.
Yeah, it feels like I need to tattoo that on my forehead. It's a permanent mantra that every time I turn lately, it's like, just trust the process. Trust the process.
Which is working out well for us.
It is.
Not in accomplishing the original plan, but in more than that. So that's working.
Indeed, yes. Well, it's now almost an excuse. I was like, original plan out the window. We're trusting the process. The process just changed.
Which is a good segue into the pitfalls of trusting the process. But maybe we define what we mean by trust the process first.
It may be useful, yes.
So let's think about the first three as a setup here. So we talked about awareness, being able to understand the reality and knowing what's kind of happening around you and your reactions, being aware of all of those, acceptance, being really in full acceptance of those facts and awarenesses that you have, and understanding what the situation is and accepting what you have, what your reaction is, where you're going from there. And then that goes into our third discipline, which is making conscious choices. That is understanding and evaluating all those facts that you have accepted. These don't always move linearly, but you can just kind of think of these first four, especially in a linear fashion. So it's making conscious choices, knowing all those facts and making a choice with those facts, not judging your reactions, not judging what has happened, and continuing that mastery mindset where you understand the overall trajectory that you're on, which brings us right into trusting the process. So now you've made a conscious choice, or a few of them along the way, kind of your vision, what you're aiming for. You've made some choices. Now, of course, life happens. Life comes in and takes turns the steering wheel left on you a few times and throws some speed bumps in your way, and all of the things that we're used to having happen when we try and plan something to the nth degree, and then find out that none of that's going to happen. So trusting the process really comes down to being able to let go and learn that you are always learning. You're always on a trajectory towards something, and that mastery mindset again of going into a kind of a growth mindset, kind of here's where we're heading. I'm going to trust that we're getting there, even though there's bumps along the way.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I always see it as the first three are very center driven. So awareness, as you explain, I understand, what's happening within you and around you. Accepting that whatever's happening, it's what it's happening, no judgment. And then making the conscious choice, it's like, okay, now I've got control. Sometimes conscious choice means I have some control over this madness. And then trusting the process is that left turn. I'm like, okay, now let it go, because you actually don't have any control.
Yes.
Yes. I also remember in the iPEC training how this is one of those things that you heard from day one. At least I heard from day one, and it was probably said by the trainers every other sentence from the first hour. And it's this constant trust the process. And for the first, definitely throughout the entire training, and then probably for the first 6 to 12 months after that, I just, every time I heard it, I wanted to jump out of my own skin and punch somebody in the face.
Yeah.
Because you're just facing the unknown and trying to shift the way you show up and your careers in some cases, and your relationships, and just, your place in the world. And all you hear is just trust the process.
Yeah. Trust the process. Trust the process. It feels like the most unhelpful thing in the world. It's
Yes.
like people saying like everything happens for a reason, or something like that. You can find meaning, you can find reason, and that can be helpful. And that can be one of the most like frustrating or dismissive things that people can say. And so hearing that so many times in the middle of this training was definitely one of those moments of like, okay, when's the process going to start effing working? Like,
Exactly. I'm trusting the process. I just don't know what it is.
yes.
Can you give me an outline of the process and then I'll trust it?
Oh God. It's like all of the disciplines in that, like, there is the logical knowing. You can understand like why this might be helpful. You can understand that if you can let go and learn to trust that you've put together a good plan, you're following your intuition, you will have roadblocks and you know that's going to happen. There will be adjustments to a plan, but the process is the overall trajectory that you're on, and trusting that you can be on a positive one as long as you're making diligent steps and you're following some of that intuition, some of that awareness, acceptance, making those continual conscious choices. It's another discipline where you can know logically, like, yeah, it would help to be able to let go in the process, in the middle of this, and not feel like every outcome that doesn't go exactly how we thought is an indictment of our plan and maybe we're off base. You can see logically why it would be helpful, but it's again one where until you've felt it, until you've noticed it, and it's still hard the next time it's going to come up, you don't know it. You're not going to know it at an emotional level until you really connect the dots for yourself and notice like, oh, right, if I do let go, I will find this next thing, or man, this just feels like a huge setback, but if I can trust the process and look for the opportunities here, what can I do about this? What am I going to do next? Until you've experienced that, you don't really know what trusting the process is. So that's why in the middle of the latter half of training, at some point you're like, yeah, I get it. Like so many of these things felt true. I felt real or understand them for myself. Then you get to trust the process over and over. And by the second half of the whole training, you're like, okay, I trust the process. All right. I trust it.
I know.
Fine. What's next?
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely a difficult one, and for everything that you just explained, it's because logically you understand it, like the mind catches up on, yes, that's what needs to happen, but the heart takes a long time to get there. At least my heart took a long time to actually get there, and especially, I don't know, I can think of starting a whole new business. There's a lot of having to convince myself to trust the process, because it was very unclear. It was unclear, when are we going to get clients? What are the clients going to want? Are we going to be successful? What if we're not? Are we going to like what we're doing? And it almost goes against any business development plan, because by not having to commit, but trying to get so specific on where you see your 1-year plan or your 4-year plan to go, it's almost the opposite of trusting the process. It's like, it's good to have goals and it's good to have ambitions and it's good to get on the same page, especially when you're working with business partners and you're not on your own, so that you can make sure that you're not moving in different directions or wishing for different things. And at the same time, you have to trust the process. Like I would say, when we look at our 1-year or 2-year plan that we wrote down in 2021, we didn't quite get to what it was written. 2 years later, we got to probably a better place, in a different place, and we matched some of the bigger ideas, but we did the details. It's like, nope, that did not happen. That did not happen. That I no longer want to happen, and it's okay. You have to let go. So it's a very difficult thing to do when your logic is trying to overwhelm the actual feeling.
Yeah. Sometimes I think of it like a stock ticker. Like there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, but if you're in the right investments, generally the trend would be positive. So you're trying to make a choice and make a plan and make a general vision and direction that you can live with, and then try and calm the logical portion of your brain that'll start screaming every time it ticks down. Every time it bumps down and it feels like, oh God, what's next? Oh God, what's next? Oh God, which is all normal. It's all natural to feel that twinge. And that's the thing about even as you learn to trust the process, it's still hard the next time it comes around.
Oh,
like,
yes.
You'd be like, okay, I'm going to let go of this. I'm going to like not overwhelm myself. I'm going to, and then you survive that. You're like, oh, thank goodness. And then the next doubt will come up. The next like left turn will happen. And you'll be like, oh God, what's that? And then you have to let go again, and trust the process again. And it's a continual That's why these are all disciplines. They're all practices to continue to come back to it. And it reminds me of that I think it's well, there's a couple different quotes that kind of come to mind. There's the Winston Churchill one. I think it's Winston Churchill, it's attributed to him anyway, where it's that a plan is useless, but planning is indispensable.
Yes.
The actual plan itself is never going to go exactly as you plan it, but having done the planning, you'll be ready to kind of take some of those, and that will be really valuable to have done. There's some other one that totally I've now lost. It really is back to that mastery mindset of how do you kind of trust that you've set a good trajectory, and how do you yeah, that was the one. It's the Buddhist idea of like, if you worry, you suffer twice. you can worry about things ahead of time, but it may or may not come to fruition. So trusting the process, you might be able to, if you can get into that space, let go of that initial worry and not, or I think it's called like the second arrow or something. It's the pain you feel on the anticipation of the pain, and that pain may never come. So you've just given yourself a self-inflicted pain along the way. So trusting the process is a good way to kind of let go of that first one. And it's not to say that things won't go sideways on you occasionally. They of course will. It's life. But you can still survive and give yourself some of that grace and leeway, and not hit that first hit, and just only hit the ones that you need to hit.
Yeah, there's tons of examples like that where trusting the process becomes a little more less of a sentence, less of a logical, and more of a feeling. And it really comes down to, at least for me, what can I control in this situation and what's outside of my control, and being very aware and accepting of those things. And sometimes knowing that trusting the process is the most difficult and the most important to do when you are surrounded by fog, because of the level of uncertainty is beyond what's usually tolerable. There's a lot more unknown. And so knowing, in that fog, talking about quotes, I think of the quote that says, when you're look around and all you see is darkness, look closer because you may be the light.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And so that's the trusting the process. It's like it's dark and it's around you, but that doesn't mean that it's over. It doesn't mean you're lost. You just got to look inside and look at, what are my values? What do I want things to be? Where do I want to go? What are the things that you really want to attach to? Values, mission, vision. And then let go of how you're going to get there. Because it's never going to work. You can start making a plan on how you would like to get there, but then every step of the way, let go that may not be how it turns out, because it won't be. Yeah.
Inevitably, it will go sideways on you.
Yes. Yeah. And then also, I think the focus on the journey. Trusting the process is really about the journey, and looking at the journey as your success outcome, not the destination. If you can look at the journey, then it's easier to recall things in the past and look at life and figuring out like, I trusted the process. I could think of when I moved to New York City, where I woke up one morning, it's like, I want to move to New York. And I remember feeling in the darkness and in the fog the whole time while I was trying to figure out, how do I move to New York? Where do I live? What do I do? Where do I work? How do I make an income? And then that took whatever months, weeks it took. And then all of a sudden the memories to like, I lived in New York and I had a job and it all worked out. But in that the trusting the process was that journey of just making one decision. And then after that one, making the next one. And after that one, making the next one.
Yeah. And first of all, absolutely about the journey. That's a good way of looking at it. Because if you think about it too, especially in like a mastery mindset, you want to grow into some kind of vision. And ideally, this is kind of some infinite game thinking. The vision should be unreachable. It should be something that you can always strive towards and always be moving towards. And you want to move the needle on, but it's not something that has an end result. And often we're kind of told we should be goal oriented, we should have a focus, and it's not bad to have those can be stepping stones along the way. But if you don't have the vision of why you want that goal and what that's going to help you build even beyond that, or what that says about who you want to be and how you want to interact with the world, then it's just a goal. And it can be then incredibly deflating, even if we do get to that goal. Either it'll be deflating if we can't get to it, or it'll be potentially deflating if we do get to it and we're like, oh, wait, what's next? What am I doing? Like I'd spent all of my effort getting to here and now it's over. Which I worry about that sometimes with like Olympians. Like they spend their entire lives training, and then most athletes are, to be generous, up to like 27 years old, maybe 30. Like there's a lot of life to live after that. You've lived your entire like life focused on a singular goal that can be achieved, and then over. What happens after that? Who do you want to be, and how does that play out afterwards? And to that point, if you want to get into the journey, I think it goes to the first three disciplines again, because you can go back to really accepting when it feels you're especially in the fog, like your New York example. I don't know. I want to move to New York. I don't know how that's going to look like. What's the what jobs would I have? What am I going to do here? All that's unknown. You go back into your values and center on what's the choice I can make right now. Yeah, it's unknown. Yes, I don't know what to do here, but how do I want to show up, and how do I want to try this, and what would I want to try first, and what's worth sticking out for, and when would I want to pull back and change course, and when would I not? And those are all the disciplines of things like conscious choice and acceptance of what's really happening, acceptance of the uncertainty. So all of those help build into trusting the process once you get to it.
Yeah. And thinking back, I could come up with a million examples of fighting the trusting the process and then finally letting go, and then things worked out.
Yes,
exactly as they were supposed to work out.
That is so often the case in life. People talk about that when they're trying to like meet somebody. They want to like, they're trying to look for like a life partner or something. And then the second they stop trying and they're like, no, I just need to, then suddenly there's suddenly it happens. Or same with like jobs, same with a lot of people who are like trying to become parents. I've heard that story many, many times. There's so much pressure and effort, but honestly on that one specifically, half of that is probably because there's so much pressure, and that stress is such a difficult portion. And then once you can let go of that, suddenly it happens out of nowhere. And so there are many examples like that you can see anecdotally. And once you can start to notice those in your own life, it sometimes becomes easier to trust the process as well. Because you remember, oh, there were other experiences where this was unknown, and then I let go, and then things worked out.
Yeah, it did. Yes. Even when they don't work out the way you wanted them to, which goes back to letting go. Know your higher calling, your higher destination, but not precisely how it's going to go, because it's not going to go that way. And that can be a huge disappointment, and it's going to be very hard to accept when things don't work out the way you intended them to do.
Yeah, that's very true. And we all know it's not going to work out exactly as intended. And even though we logically know that, it's we either throw the towel in on planning entirely sometimes, or we just get frustrated when it doesn't go according to plan, even though we know it won't.
Yeah, definitely one. All right. So should we coach?
Yes, let's do some coaching.
Okay.
You were excited and then it dropped immediately.
$1 million question. Who coaches first?
Back to this one.
I think I chose the last two times, so it's your turn. I'm trusting the process and letting go of the choice.
I'm going to accept that either way is the wrong answer here and just dive in to what my first impulse is. I will coach first.
Okay.
All right.
Good answer.
So one thing. The one thing that we think about sometimes in terms of, and this just some setup in terms of trusting the process, is that often we can feel like, oh, I'll be happy when I get there. And there is some ephemeral, like that's when I'm successful. That's when I have, I'll be happier when my business is stable. And we don't really have any parameters around that. But we have this idea that there's a there that we have to get to. There's some kind of finish line, and then we can look around and be happy or be fulfilled or look at other parts of the life. We just have to get to there. We have to get there, and we can really get some tunnel vision when we focus on that. So thinking of there in that sense, what do you believe is lacking in your life right now that will make a difference when you are there? Or what's something that you feel like you might be waiting to be there on?
Damn it, I put that question in there and now I'm stuck answering it.
Foiled again, self. Foiled again.
Yes. It's like the perfect question as a coach, not as a client. What do I believe is lacking in my life right now that I'm willing to actually say out loud and to the public?
Ah, yes. The two-layer question on a podcast,
You know?
Coach.
It's an interesting question because if I look at, I don't know that there's a whole lot. I'm sure there's some. I would say, oh, I have something that could be shared in public. That's the filter right now. I would say that there for me right now is, especially having to finish an accounting call this morning with our accountant and then another call with an associate, with a partner. After that one, there is wanting to see our business have a bigger team and they're to get to a bigger impact. So it's not just a numbers game. It's more about, there's so many things we want to do and so many things that we can't, at least I can't wait to be doing or to have completed so we can move to the next idea. And a lot of the block or the slowing down right now is just the fact that it's two of us with a bunch of contractors, but it's we need a lot more people. And by a lot, I don't mean 6,000, but even just a couple more, 2, 3, 5, would really allow us to finish and accomplish all the things that are on the constant running list of like, well, we want to do this next and this next and this next and be out there this way and have these types of conversations with clients and these relationships. And big one was when we talked to our friend JC Quintana right before this call and how he had all these big ideas. And my first thought was, we need more people. And so that's a there, and that's a there that's been there for a while, from I would say the inception of the business. So it's very close to that. And it also feels like it's definitely a challenge to trust the process because of those bigger goals and those annual, where do you want to be in 2 years and where do you want to be in 5 years? And then looking at those and thinking, oh, we didn't quite get there. Not the way we wanted, in different ways. And so it's very much like, okay, I want to trust the process. And then the process is not fast enough. How can I speed up the process?
That makes sense. It is definitely a pressure to feel like, hey, there's a place that, especially when you get excited about things, there's something that you want to get to, there's something you want to be at that. If you were to get more specific on a few of those, what are some of the bigger items you feel like you want to get to that you're excited for?
Well, I want us to have some online learning, which we've started and we're continuing and we're taking the steps to do. I want us to, the biggest thing which we've been talking about and reflecting on for the last couple of years is to not be the ones that have to do as much. And so, getting out there and doing some execution, but also a lot of the things that are more in our working genius wheels, where it's more strategy, it's more relationship building, it's more looking at the big picture and then figuring out how we get there, discerning what needs to be done. Now, do I know that that's once we get there, that's going to be what I'm satisfied with? Probably not. The chances are that goal is going to keep moving. And yet there are some things that we've been working on, marketing and website and things like that. And those are the dreams, the visions that I have, that then I have a hard time saying like, oh, maybe in 3 months we'll be there, in a month we'll be there, because of the constraint of just man hours, and distractions and everything else that needs to be done. And so it's not, oh, let's launch the web, then the updated website next week. Well, not yet. And that not yet seems to be dragging quite a bit.
Yeah, we were just joking about that before this call. Even like
Yes.
we have had the plan to set all of our marketing in order for, I don't know, 3 months now. It's been top priority that keeps being bumped to number 2 by random occurrences. lucky occurrences, but random occurrences.
Yes.
We keep getting pushed. It keeps getting pushed down the pipeline. So if you were to think about that dynamic where we have that desire to put all that together, and we know that there's been distractions, there's been other things coming along, how can you apply a trusting the lens process? What would that look like if you think about those two sometimes conflicting initiatives?
I would say the first thing I need to, and I'll figure out how to change that need to choose to. At first, I need to get it out loud. The first thing I need to do is let go of the timeline in my head. I get pretty impatient when I see something and I have the vision and I know what it would be. And I want the vision to just be there. And I don't have the patience to go through the steps. And so the choosing instead of needing to do that comes in, because if I don't choose to let go of whatever timeline I have in my head that things need to be, happening by, I get stuck and I don't even take the steps. So I don't trust the process to the point of figuring out what are the steps that I can take. Now I can't, submit a LinkedIn post this week saying, check out our new website, or I can't do all these other things. Like we've been creating all these great motion graphics and other social media materials and other things that are just, I feel like they're just sitting there and collecting dust. Because in my head, the steps is, well, we want a place for people to go to after they see that it's actually makes sense and it's not a mess. And it has the information that we want to be out there. And so it's this constant, okay, well, not having the website ready now impacts all this other work. And yet this other work needs to continue so that we take advantage of it and we don't get stuck with not having anything. And so let's go back to doing the website, and then we get a phone call, and now we're distracted on contract and proposal for a week, and then we get another phone call, and we're distracted by these other things. And so it's really hard to trust the process, because at the bottom line is, if we just had someone that was dedicated to doing that until it gets done, and yet it's the chicken and the egg. Like we actually have to do all these other things that are distracting us in order to get to a place where we have a full-time marketing or a full-time creator role. And even then, I'm sure there will be all sorts of other distractions where we will shift their priorities on. So how do I stop? What I struggle with is, how do I stop spinning because I can't get to the end and I get stuck on the first step because I want to be at the end instead of in the first step or the second step? I'm not sure if any of that made any sense.
That absolutely makes sense. It sounds like one of the major things is the idea of some of the timeline. You're very strong on accountability. You want to get things done. You want to set out a plan. You're good at meeting those plans. Especially we've seen that 1,000 times with things like client work, which is very, there's a lot of deadlines. We'll figure out what we're going to do to hit those deadlines. It sounds like that it becomes more abstract than in the running of the business sense, when that is a direct competing influence with just the amount of hours one can commit to something. And it turns out you need money to hire a professional marketer. Apparently, you can't just scoop that off the streets. So there's obviously kind of a chicken and the egg situation going on. So you've got some of that, it sounds like, natural impulse to move towards like timelines and have things done in an order, and then you want to get this done because you see these steps in sequence, and and you can plan that. You can see how those getting this done first would allow you to get to those next steps, but that's then coming into conflict with needing to do things that come along ad hoc. And those are none of these have been bad things to do. And I'm obviously editorializing here since I'm also in on those ones, but that's those are sometimes they can feel like maybe necessary distractions, or they're just good distractions for life. Not to put too much of a value term on it, but it's not time loss. But it does make sense that there would be then that pressure of like knowing that there's a timeline that could be followed, knowing you want to get to this vision, seeing the steps that would go there, and not being able to make the first step. So let's talk a little bit about that timeline pressure. What do you think drives some of that feeling of needing the timeline met, that you have that expectation or steps that you have laid out?
Good question. I would say a big one is comparison. My timeline gets, the pressure on the timeline in my head gets very heavy when I compare where I would like to be with where other people seem to be. And so look at the great website and the great messaging and and we're not there yet. And so then the distraction is like, oh, let's come up with ideas on what's going to help us get there. But then letting go of all the other things that are dependent and starting to look at the dependencies. A lot of it is also just the way I work and my mind works. For a vision to be a vision that I actually want to work on, I create images and movies in my head. And it's very hard for me to see the movie and know exactly what it looks like, but then not knowing how long it's going to take to be there because I'm already there. Because I'm in the movie, I'm already there. And I'm doing all the things that I get to do in that movie. And then when I stop and realize can't do any of those because we don't have any of this, of the script or any of the movie parts ready. We don't even have the actors. Then that's where that's when it's easy for me to then look for the shiny objects and be like, well, I have the movie in my mind. In my mind, the movie's happening now, not in the future. Can't get there, so shiny object. Let's go follow that one.
That makes sense. It's if you know the future, and both of us struggle with the tenacity work. So if you know the future and you know there's the steps that have to get done to get there, it would be hard not to live just in that future. And that has also worked out fairly well for us, knowing the future and managing to walk into it. First, though, on the comparison note, I want to note one thing there. I know we've talked about Simon Sinek and Adam Grant a lot, and they have a great podcast where they talk about some of the relationship they had with each other before they really knew each other. And so there's the idea that they throw out there of being, and I think Simon Sinek is the one who coined it, being worthy rivals rather than being adversaries, because they felt like they were kind of competition to each other in their space and how they would address things, but they both knew they had strengths and weaknesses the other one didn't. And so if you think about reframing some of those ideas, comparison ideas with the idea of a worthy rival, how, if at all, does that change the feeling of comparison?
It helps a lot. And for the most part, my feeling of comparison is under the guidelines of under the lens of a worthy rival, not a competitor. So I rarely look at other companies, other people out there who may be in a similar space that we are, or even not in a similar space that we are. But, other situations, other organizations and people that I may feel there's a competition, an internal competition, not necessarily an external one. I don't necessarily look at them as they're taking something away from me. So it's not I need to be there first because otherwise I will not get it, whatever it is. I honestly don't know that I've ever felt that way in most of my career in any job. Like I've never seen jobs as, oh, if that person gets promoted, it means I lose. It's never been a loser win as much as, okay, just, figure out do I actually want that promotion or do I not want the promotion? That's a lot of the thinking behind a worthy rival switch from true competitors or enemies. It's because when it comes down to, do I actually want what they have? Well, most of the times, no, not the way that they have it and not the way they got it, because that's not me. So the comparison is mostly, when I think about it from a competition point of view, and it's a competition with myself that gets a spotlight when I look at others, because it's more of like, sure, I want to be there. I'm not there as into doing it their way and how they do it and what they're doing, but I want to be at that stage. And they are or seem to be. And so I get that timeline pressure. I'm like, okay, can we get there? Can we get there? Can we get there? When are we going to get there?
Yeah. So it sounds like seeing some of those then adds to the movie that we were talking about too, of like, hey, if you see where other people are and it feels like it's somewhat similar to where you'd like to be, that's just added proof there is some reality to the idea and the movie that is presented. And then I imagine, given what you're talking about, that adds even more pressure to feel like you want to get to that.
It does indeed. And then when I look back at how things have worked out, and I actually focus on the journey that had to either forcefully or willingly, made me trust the process, I noticed that, first of all, the journey is completely different from what I had possibly imagined. I mean, part of the movie in my head, it's also the movie The Journey. Or some of it, I've been able to let go of the close details. But also, even the destination, it looks nothing like I had imagined. So whatever movie I had in my head, not at all how it turned out. With the core was the same. The core feelings are the same. Actually, some of the core feelings are bigger and better and more fulfilling than I could ever imagine. And so there's a core feelings, like it's the values that remain because of the choices made along the journey and the vision and the mission. But it's almost as if we fall in backwards into the vision and the mission. And I know it's happened with us. I mean, we wrote down visions and missions and core values at the beginning of Siamo's journey, and we tweaked them and also realized they especially the vision and the mission, I don't think ever changed, because that's where they were from the beginning. And to actually sit back and look at the journey and look at where we are as a destination and think like, oh my God, we're actually living it. We're living the vision and the mission. And there was a lot of trusting the process. It was completely trusting the process, but it wasn't a conscious plan of like, well, the vision and the mission and the visions are going to be lived, and we're going to realize them when they happen this exact way. That's the letting go. And that's the letting go that I am getting better at doing from I'll take that back. I have plenty of other situations in my life when I'm not getting better at that. But in some situations in my life, I've gotten better at letting go a little bit of the details, of wanting to know the details and the timelines and the plan and who's involved and how they're involved and all the how. And in other situations, they go back to like the smaller pieces where I can't let go. The tactical pieces, like getting our website done, like that should be on a plan. And I've been talking about putting it in Asana as a project plan for, I think, 2 months. And yes, the plan is going to change and there's going to be things, but it is possible to actually plan that.
Yeah, it's always what I find. We always laugh about that when we see people do Agile that way. Agile is like, oh, we'll do no planning. We'll just adjust as we go. Like, you don't even know where you're heading. You're just adjusting and nothing. No, that makes sense. There could be a way to plan and then just adjust that as we go. No, all of that makes sense. And then you even talked about how, like, okay, there were times where we ended up trusting the process, and it almost feels like we fell backwards into the vision. And there's been times where it feels like you end up at a place where the feelings and the impact feels bigger than we were even hoping for. And which is great. That's an awesome experience. So knowing that as a previous experience and mapping that towards what you have going on now, how might you remind yourself to trust the process that's currently feels occasionally like chaos?
Besides repeating the mantra every time I meditate all day long, I would say make that plan. So stop talking about having a plan and actually having it. It's that's usually the biggest gift I give to myself after I procrastinate on everything. It goes back to just write down the list. Stop trying to keep the list in your head and write it down. And then you know when to adjust. And it's also out there. Now it's almost like a manifestation to the universe. It's out there. And so my tendency is always to shortcut that piece. It's like, well, if it's in my head, that's good enough. No, like, no, it's never good enough. It's in my head because it's noise. But if it's out there, then I can actually release of the pressure of like, I want this done tomorrow, or I want this done next week. I in much easier release. And I've done it. I mean, moving across the ocean, across countries, always been the same process where when I make the decision of I want to move to New York, well, that means I want to be in New York tomorrow morning, not in 6 months, having to figure everything else out. And the first step for me, it's usually to actually say it out loud, to start telling people. I'm moving to New York. When? Don't know yet, figuring it out. The next 5-6 months. I want to be there by September. And that starts solidifying some of the things. I also find that that's when the universe really answers with solutions. New York is an example, but I've had this for so many different examples. When I decided to move to New York, it was about, I remember exactly when it was. I was in New York for New Year's Eve with my friend. I was visiting her it was the 2019 going 2020 New Year's Eve. Mm-hmm. And I remember being there and feeling like this is where I want to be. And I lived in Italy at that point. So I was very far away from this is where I want to be. I had nothing figured out, but that was it. And so I went back to Italy and I told my friend and I told whoever I was like, I'm going to move to New York. And then I started looking at it, a specific timeline or what would be realistic. And the fact that I worked in Switzerland in the summers and I was teaching English to adults. So we were mainly on a scholastic schedule calendar, even though they were adults because of the summer breaks. And so with all that in mind, I was like, well, realistically speaking, September. And once I decided that, and I decided like, oh, it doesn't have to be tomorrow. It doesn't have to be, January 10th. And today is January 1st. Once I decided that, then it was really much easier to trust the process because I was like, okay, I've now decided when the deadline is. By September, I want to be in New York. And I'm pretty sure I went through it by going to Spain for a couple of weeks in there. But anyway, that's where the plan kind of goes sideways. But and so that was it. And so then by the time I got to the beginning, the end of the spring, and I still had no job, no place to live, none of the really big details that you may want to, have figured out if you're about to move to New York across the ocean. But that was it. Like in my mind, the decision was made and I was going to trust the process and figure it out. And so then, I talked to my aunt who lives on Long Island and she said, like, you can stay with me as long as you want until you find a place in the city. So place to live, done. And then I shared with my students at that moment who were executives and senior level people in a company in Italy. I told them like, hey, like I'm going to have to say goodbye at the beginning of the summer because I'm going to move to New York. And then I started kind of prepping them for that change. It was a fairly big change for them after having me as their teacher for 3 years. And so in one of the lessons we had planned, one of them was like, hey, I have a proposal for you since you're moving to New York. It's like, we actually have been talking about opening an office in New York. How would you like to be the one that opens it? And so all of a sudden I had a job. I had no idea what the job was going to be like. It turned out that it didn't work out, economy and different things, but I had a job. And so then it was just a matter of like, now get a plane ticket. And then it became tactical and move in. And then when I was there, I was living with my aunt and my cousin had been total coincidence. This is where the universe really conspires once you let go. Because it was the same thing. Like I was living on Long Island. I wanted to live in the city. How do I let go so that I will just let it happen when it needs to happen, not tomorrow? And my cousin happened to be there for a 3-month, training and something with her company with a bunch of other people from Europe. And we're out having drinks with them. And one of them says like, oh, I'm moving to New York. I'll have a place to live. And I says like, I'm here and I'm looking for a place to live and a roommate. And we look at each other and we're like, well, we seem to be getting along enough for the last 5 minutes that we met each other, want a room together and find an apartment. So those are all those details just worked out.
Yeah. No, that absolutely makes sense. And that goes back to actually what we heard from Sterling. You talked about the RAS, where where there's like the part of your brain that is attuned to like listening for things. You get a car and suddenly everybody's driving that same brand of car, even though that has actually changed distribution wise on the road. They're the things we listen for. And I think this is one of the things that works out so well when we start to voice the things that we want. Not only do we then end up tuning into opportunities, but the more we voice that out loud, the more other people are also actually listening to those things and hearing for us, which is where we end up finding, hey, I know you want to move to New York. I happen to have this opportunity. Do you want to do that? And it wouldn't have happened if they didn't know you wanted to move to New York. So that whole saying that out loud becomes incredibly important. And all of these little things end up snowballing because you just start to be attuned to what are the grains that I can hold on to and what's going to go build up into the thing that I want. And it can move that way And so knowing that and mapping that onto the idea of getting
Mhm.
kind of that plan out of your head, where do you need to voice putting that plan down?
Definitely on Asana. So I think it's been voiced to many people. So it's
Mhm.
definitely there, and we are making progress. It's
Mhm.
not a blank page. So I think the next big step is just to actually create the project plan
Mhm.
and figure out like what is realistic, not what's in my head realistic, or what's a wish, but what's realistic, and then start looking at that and work on it. I mean, I thought about working on it during the Thanksgiving break, and then decided that I just didn't want to be in front of the laptop for 4 days, so I didn't.
Mhm.
And those things are okay as long as it's not because I didn't work on it now I still have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing next, because there's a million parts to this. So making that plan and just crossing the list off and changing the list when it's time to change it, but having something concrete out there that's not in my head.
Right. And when do you want to do that by?
Well, I was supposed to do it by November 15th. That didn't work. So I will commit to doing it by November 30th.
Okay.
Not into December.
And because it has happened already 3 times to us, including this morning, what might you do if a wrench gets thrown in that and we end up in the proposal writing cycle again? Again, not a bad problem to have. Not saying this is a problem.
No, not a bad problem to have.
Should that happen before November 30th, how can you give yourself some space and grace?
I'll give myself until the end of the weekend. So then I am going to work the weekend to actually make it happen. Next week is not going to start without the plan.
All right.
Mind you, it'll take me half an hour to do this. So it's not a thing that's going to take me a long time. It's not a big commitment. It's just more about actually sitting down and doing it.
What support can I offer for that?
Well, you're going to have to read it and actually review it and edit it. So
yeah, I can do that.
And agree to the deadlines. And assign yourself on areas in there.
Yeah, that's fair. all that is doable. All right. Right. Well, that's a good action plan and good moving forward. Anything else you would want to say before you close out your round on the seat?
No, but definitely glad the seat is switching.
I feel like you say that every time.
I do.
You know, like this whole being coached in public thing, huh?
Yes.
Too much fishbowl for you?
All right. So I'm actually going to throw the same question back at you because I didn't write it on purpose.
All right. Let's do it.
And let's see where we get there. So what do you believe is lacking in your life now that will make a difference between being here and being there? What's a here and what's a there?
I feel like there are a couple of things that come up to mind that are kind of like already in flight. One is working on the stuff that we were just talking about in your session, more on the business portion. There's a lot that like is in development, and I go back and forth on like there's some enjoyment in some of the creation work there, and there's some like I really want to get to those next things that we can do and start to attach us as like partners to people and just kind of deliver these things we already have while building other stuff that would give us a chance to have more opportunity for things like writing that book that we're continuing, which is in progress. I'm doing a lot of we talked to a new acquaintance last week, and I'm definitely in the process of like he told us some advice he got on writing that was like you can't connect all the dots until you have the dots, and so that has really freed up some mental space because I'm writing a lot of dots at this point. So it'd be easier to kind of commit to that when there's some of that space and we have some of these other things figured out, because it's not just going back and forth on knowing that we have to get this done, especially as we keep getting phone calls to go get more of these things done. So there's that. Outside of that, though, the things that really are making a difference currently in life are actually it's a lot of the process of working on the other disciplines, and some of that like some acceptance work and some conscious choice work, and then some other work in feeling like you can focus on and work on things like belonging. That's helpful. And that has been a process that has definitely taken a lot more shape. So trying to decide whether it's worth bringing up as a topic here, because it's already kind of in flight. But I think it's already making a difference in how to show up. And I guess if I can map this into the future, is this meandering enough for you? Can I wander along? Let me
You're
walk
clearly
my
not
whole
there
thought
yet.
process out. Yeah, I haven't reached it. Thanks everybody for taking this long train. The
They're walking. We're some train of our own.
I think that attaching that there's the next rounds of work that we're going to be doing, both in the creation of this, in the creating in the partnerships. I need to be focused on having that acceptance and that confidence that I've been building for in other areas, and feeling that working down any and working through any feelings of imposter syndrome that come up as we take on new stuff. I think that's probably the next thing that will inevitably come up in different ways that I'm not expecting yet. Is that I've built a lot of confidence in the things that we have done, and I'm not feeling like we're imposters in this space. We are in the space now that we've wanted to be in, and we're playing it. I think to my mind, a way that we want to be playing it, and so getting that mindset more solidified is a huge part of like what will be there, quote unquote. Getting to there would be having some of that set and ready.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That was quite the meandering, but we finally got we got there. We got to it there.
Here's the 9 things I'm thinking about right now. That's a view into my mind.
Yes.
Nobody wishes for that.
Well, interestingly enough, the thread that you started is where I would loop us back into. That the rest was necessary to highlight the thread, but the thread you started is the belonging. And so what does belonging look like for you?
So this has come out in a couple of different ways. There's feeling like I have a space and a thought that's worth expressing, like in meetings and stuff, rather than just continually being in the more observer role, being able to share when I have like an impulse to like, there's something that could be contributed here. Not shutting that down before I have a chance to just express it. That's a big one. That would be helpful. And then in things like in doing facilitation, there's a lot of, sometimes I'll feel like I'm either like the younger person in the room, or there's just newer to the game, and like that can be a breeding ground occasionally for some imposter syndrome, which has been very much worked down through a lot of this year. And I feel more like, yeah, this is a place I'm happy to live in, exist in, and play out, because I now see the tie-ins of like, if I can feel like I can have some space here, and that's why I tie it back to belonging. If I can feel like I have the space and the room to do this, I can perform a lot more comfortably and a lot more actively, and it's made it both more enjoyable and more feasible. It's easier to do.
It is easier to do. And so on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is I don't feel like I belong at all, and it's all imposter, and 10 is I'm so comfortable and I now need a new discomfort zone to get into a new situation. Where do you think your belonging sits right now?
Actually, it's moving currently in a lot of arenas. It's now in like a kind of 7-8 range, and that would have been like a 4-5 range for a long time on a good day. So it's definitely made some significant swings even recently.
Yeah. And what allowed it to swing?
At the risk of sounding cliche, me. I allowed it to be. I realized at some point that there was a time, like over the summer, I was kind of hit a weird bump in my kind of like reasoning and mental processing of how things were going. And I realized that for a long time I'd kind of wanted to feel some of that belonging, and I realized in the middle of it, like, yeah, it'd be great to like have people to reach out to, but for a long time I felt like I didn't have necessarily places to reach out to. I could only find a couple of relationships that I was relying on heavily for many things, and that's fine. It's not like I'm looking for a ton of those, but I wasn't also, what I realized was I wasn't actually doing the work of reaching out and using any of those relationships. And so that is what was standing in the way. So there was the allowing myself the chance to belong and to be vulnerable and reach out and risk, for lack of a better term, though that was in the way.
Yeah, that's really good awareness and acceptance of the situation. And the portion of how much you could control the situation you were in. It wasn't completely out of your control. Somehow relationships don't just spring and happen on their own.
The even more surprising part was that I already had a bunch of relationships that were there.
Yeah.
I just wasn't using them this way. I wasn't feeling comfortable enough and willing to let myself be comfortable enough to do that.
Yeah.
So I ended up with that as a difficulty.
Yeah.
So,
and what have you gained by getting out of your own way?
The biggest thing is I'm much more relaxed. I can access a lot more natural energy sources. Like I can feel more engaged in what I'm doing when I'm not constantly kind of worrying about not belonging, not being there, not being whatever. It's just the comfort and the confidence has allowed me to work in a much more flow-like state. And so it's a lot easier to just exist, be, and grow whatever we want to grow, do more of what we want to do, because we can. We know how. So I think that has been a huge difference and a huge difference maker.
Yeah, indeed. It makes sense. So you said that you would probably put yourself on a 7-8 scale of belonging. Where would you like to be?
I'd like to ideally, I guess, get to 10. I don't know that it is as necessary, but I think there's just so much more ground to explore here that I haven't yet explored because I'm fairly new into this and working in a different mindset. And it's been incredibly productive and helpful. And it's just helped me like feel attached to what I'm doing, to the relationships that I have, and to feel invested in them and to feel like I have a place in them. And so I'd like to, I guess, get to a 10 and explore what else is possible.
What does 10 look like?
The reason I'm pausing to answer that is ideally there's like a what feels like an unrealistic panacea of like just living in authenticity in relationships, and not feeling that concern, that worry over belonging. And I think the reason I hesitate on that is that I wouldn't be that upset if there are the occasional doubts, nor would I would be surprised if there are the occasional doubts or moments where there's just like a push through that. And I don't think that necessarily has to take away from being at a 10. I think it's okay to have those moments and just, again, back to trusting the process. Maybe that's why it's on my mind. That there can and will be bumps in that, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's not a 10. I think it's just even more levels of comfort and letting go of needing to. I think a 10 to me looks more like feeling more confident in that without explicit confirmation. We've been lucky, and it only happened after I was already finding some acceptance in this for myself, which goes back to trusting the process as well. The second I started to let go, this was more present. But we've been lucky that in the last even just month or so, we've had a lot of good validation that the space that we're creating and the help that we're providing has been received well and appreciated, and they're seeing the value of it, and they want to do more with it. Like the clients that we've had, and honestly, friendships and relationships like we had at the retreat, we've seen that we've been explicitly externally validated on this. So I guess the 10 really looks like not just needing that external validation, but feeling that more internally first. And I've already kind of started on that. I think that's one of the things that almost allowed for the external validation to start coming in.
Yeah. It's like, if I believe in it, then the rest of the world will just align. And it starts internally too. Well, and interestingly enough, as you described the 10, it's almost that jumping point to get to the next level. It's not needing the external validation to know that deep inside what you're doing and how you're showing up is valuable. Then gives you the confidence to like get into a different space, tweak it, see what else is possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it would help you get to attend.
I almost feel like I use this too much. Journaling helps a lot to remind myself of times when I have been in this space and to know to reflect on the journey that has been. So it has been particularly engaged in the last few months. And Rachel and I were just talking about how this has been an overly unexpectedly busy month, basically since October 20th or so, like, which was right before our retreat. We went to a wedding, which was great. We went to the retreat right after that, and that just went immediately into a whole bunch of things. We had more travel. Rachel had travel. We've had foster kittens. It's just been an onslaught of things for the last month, and so I haven't even really taken time to sit down and digest the way that I would like to. Even all the stuff that we got to do at the retreat. So I think that would probably be a great place to start. And then there's other areas that I've been leaning on and reaching out in relationships. And so I guess leaning more into that would be actively choosing to get to that. And so by actively choosing, I mostly mean making the space and commitment to doing that. It's been so many mornings where I'm trying to do things like now that I've also signed up to run a triathlon. So that's taking up time. So like I don't have as much time to if I don't have a full set of hours, and I usually don't anymore these mornings, I could potentially have done like some working out and some reflection work. And now it's a one or the other thing. So I'm doing a lot of like, let's make sure all of these current fosters are fed, which they'll be out after this week. We only have like a couple of days left for some of them, and then one other week for the next set. And then so there'll be more room there. So I think that will help. But it is a matter of like just committing to that or finding the time to do that. If I don't do that in the mornings, which is usually the kind of productive time for that kind of work, then what do I do after that?
What do you do after that if you don't make time in the morning?
Well, what actually happens usually so I get into the day, we get random phone calls that add to some of our to-do list. We change our schedule and needs, and then it's fielding those things until the mid to late afternoon, and then it's then it's dinner and trying to figure out evening stuff. And so what actually happens is that usually just steps in the way and then gets everywhere. So what I would like, I guess, to have happen is to figure out how to hold some space in the afternoons, or just defend it or keep it open. If I don't have it in the morning, then I need to set it aside immediately before starting work, because usually I'll just dive in, put full energy into work, and then by the time I hit those afternoon, I'm like, yeah, I don't have the mind space to do this anymore.
Yeah.
So it would have to be having that carved out and committed to right after the morning goes awry, which is usually about 9 a.m.
When we're lucky. So when would you like to start creating that space? When would you like that space created?
I think realistically, it's going to be after this week. We have one set of very high needs fosters that will be returned to the shelter on Friday. And so that's going to open a good amount of time. The other ones are just basically kittens at this point that we have to just have them gain enough weight that they'll be good to go for neutering and spaying. So probably starting Saturday.
All right. Okay, so starting Saturday, and what would help you start on Saturday?
I'm gonna need some time to clear my head to get ready for that, and I've already felt it start to move. Like Thanksgiving was a big thing to kind of get ready for. We finally took a couple days to kind of crash after Thanksgiving and do some just purposely doing nothing for a little bit, which has helped free up some space. And so now that I've had some just clearing of headspace, it's setting aside some time to just freeform journal. I need like probably 2 hours between here and Saturday that I'll just need to put on a calendar somewhere to just get a lot of thoughts out to not have the mental clutter. For the first time, it doesn't feel like mental clutter in a bad way. I can just feel that it's distracting from being able to organize the many, many things that we have, many balls that we have in the air currently. So it's not feeling like overwhelm. It's not feeling like clutter that I've had before, where it feels like, now it's hazy and I don't know what to do next, but it is enough clutter that it's preventing clarity on being able to take next steps. So I think to get to this, to successfully start to plan this, I'm just going to have to set aside some time and brain dump.
All right. So we have 5 day-ish between now and Saturday. What specific time?
Let me see. Well, we're going to be traveling for one of these days. So that'll take that time. It might actually be well, no, I'm going to be leaving pretty early that morning. Well, here's an interesting one. If I pack up everything Tuesday night, which usually I would do anyway, then I would have plenty of free time to still I'll have to leave my house by 9 or so in the morning when we're flying out, but I would have between 7 and 9 to just do some brain dumps. It doesn't need to be anything else. We're already set up for the next trip. I wouldn't have, and that can just be work that we would do together. We can do together in the travel. So that's fine. So maybe that's the day that will be available to just between 7 and 9, which is usually the hours in which I would do something like this, to have that. So I'm going to put that on my calendar right now.
All right.
Saved.
All right. What's a backup plan if that doesn't work or there's a curveball?
The backup plan realistically would be probably Thursday night, because I'm going to get home and then we're going to get home at 5. I'm not going to have mental energy to do more work at that point, but I would have time, as Rachel's going to be at a rehearsal that night. So I'm going to have a couple hours of just quiet time in the house. So that would be the fallback. And failing that, Friday morning.
All right. So a couple of options there. What kind of support would you need?
Nothing. I just needed to say all this out loud. As you can tell by all the endlessly meandering crisscross answers that I've given here to every single question. I need that mental space. This is what I mean by the clutter. This is what it sounds like in my head. I don't have that space. I don't know how it's
your 15 washing machines.
Ooh. Right. I'm really excited. I feel really lucky for where we are at. I feel a lot of gratitude for the opportunities that we have had, that we continue to see, but hopefully come to fruition. Some will work, some won't. It'll all be all kinds of different things coming up, but I'm really excited about what we have done, what we can do. And it's a really good place to be. And I'd like to capitalize on that, which means I do need to take care of mental health and prioritize mental health along the way here.
Yeah. And it is a big trust the process moment as well.
Yes.
So that's definitely a big trust the process. It's like we've climbed a mountain and now we're like, okay, where's the next mountain? And where's the path?
Yeah.
Somebody point me to the path. And instead of just take the first step, the path will appear. So.
Yes. Oh my God, is it trust the process?
Yes, it's a big trust the process.
And this is the other thing that I don't want to fall into. We've been very fortunate and trusting the process has worked out really well. I don't want to fall into relying on that and not doing some of the planning and steps. And I feel like I'm on the precipice of, if I let this clutter go on and if I don't clear this out and start to get more diligent with this, I'm going to get into the unhealthy trust the process where I'm using that as an excuse not to do the work, not to set down to do this. So that is part of the process.
I can't relate to that at all.
Yeah.
Cannot relate to that at all. Okay. Well, good. Sounds like we both have things to do.
Yeah. And unsurprisingly, they are around the same place.
Yes. All right. Well, everybody, good luck with trusting the process out there. It's vital and so difficult.
It's vital. It's difficult. It's painful. It's powerful. All the things you want it to be.
Yes, exactly. And next time we'll walk into authenticity.
Yes.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.